On May 3rd, 1937, the Hindenburg began its 3-day voyage from Frankfurt, Germany to Lakehurst, New Jersey. At 804 feet long, it was the Titanic of the sky, with its iconic silver paint and large swastikas covering its rear tail fin. It was the pride of Nazi Germany and the flagship in Hitler's propaganda toolbox. On May 6th, after reaching Lakehurst and beginning its landing, the Hindenburg, much like the Nazi government would do 8 years later, went up in flames before crashing down and claiming multiple innocent lives with it. So what happened? Or more likely, what caused it to happen? Let's find out. As something floaty, this way comes. Alright, cut here, insert intro music. What? There's no intro music. Frank, seriously? I gave you one job to do, and that was to get the damn intro music. I don't care if I don't pay you enough. If I could find a skeleton to do your job cheaper, I would. Wait. I live next to a cemetery. Where's my shovel at? Fine, we'll move on with the show. I'll just put this here. This is Herbert Morrison's famous audio recording that was captured during the Hindenburg Disaster.
We both flew down from Chicago yesterday afternoon aboard one of the giant new 21-passenger flagships of American Airlines. It took us only 3 hours, 55 minutes to fly non-stop from Chicago to New York. When we landed at Newark, we found another flagship of American Airlines waiting to take us to Lakehurst with our equipment when we were ready to go. And incidentally, American Airlines is the only airline in the United States which makes connections with the Hindenburg. The Hindenburg left Frankfurt, Germany, Tuesday evening rather, at 7:30 their time. And for better than 2.5 days, they've been speeding through the skies over miles and miles of water here to America. Now they're coming in to make a landing of the Zeppelin. I'm going to step out here and cover it from the outside. So as I move out, we'll just stand by a second. Well, here it comes, ladies and gentlemen. We're out now outside of the hangar, and what a great sight it is. A thrilling one. It's a marvelous sight. It's coming down out of the sky, pointed directly towards us and toward the mooring mast. The mighty diesel motors just roared, their propellers fighting into the air and throwing it back into a gale like whirlpool. No wonder this great floating palace can travel through the air at such a speed with these powerful motors behind it. Now, a field that we thought active when we first arrived has turned into a moving mass of cooperative action. The landing crews have rushed to the posts and spots, and orders are being passed along, and last-minute preparations are being completed for the moment we have waited for so long. The ship is riding majestically toward us like some great feather, riding as though it was mighty proud of the place it's playing in the world's aviation. The ship is no doubt bustling with activity, as we can see. Orders are shouted to the crew. The passengers are probably lining the windows, looking down at the field ahead of them, getting their glimpse of the mooring mast. It's practically standing still now. They've dropped ropes out of the nose of the ship, and it's been taken a hold of down on the field by a number of men. It's starting to rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from...
It burst into flames. Get it started. It's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh, my, get out of the way, please. It's bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring mast, and all the folks agree that this is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's place 400 or 500 feet into the sky. It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the frame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the prayers that are speeding around it. I told you, I can't talk to people. His friends are on there. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen. Honest, it's just like there are massive smoking wreckage. And everybody can't hardly breathe and talk and screaming. Lady, I'm sorry. Honestly, I can hardly breathe. I'm going to step inside where I cannot see it. Charlie, that's terrible. Listen, folks, I'm going to have to stop for a minute because I've lost the voice. This is the worst thing I've ever witnessed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back again. I've sort of recovered from the terrific explosion and the terrific crash that occurred just as it was being pulled down to the mooring mast. The terrible amount of hydrogen gas in it just caused the tail surface broke into flame first. Then there was a terrific explosion, and that followed by the burning of the nose and the crashing nose into the ground, and everybody tearing back at breakneck speed to get out from underneath it because it was over the people at the time it burst into flames. Now, whether it fell on the people who were witnessing it, we do not know. But as it exploded, they rushed back. And now it's smoking a terrific black smoke floating up into the sky. The flames are still leaping maybe 30, 40 feet from the ground, the entire 811 feet length of it. They're frantically calling for ambulances and things. The wires are being humming with activity. And I've lost my breath several times during this exciting moment here. Will you pardon me just a moment? I'm not going to stop talking. I'm just going to swallow several times until I can keep on. I should imagine that the nose is not more than 500 feet or maybe 700 feet from the mooring mast. They have dropped 2 ropes, and whether or not some spark or something settled on fire, we don't know, or whether something pulled loose on the inside of the ship, causing a spark and causing it to explode in the tail surface. But everything crashed to the ground, and there's not a possible chance of anybody being saved. I wish I could stop in just a moment and see if I can get my breath again. And Charlie, if you'll fade it out just a minute, I'll come back with more description, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm back again. I raced down to the burning ship, and just as I walked up to the ship, climbed over the picket line, I met a man coming out, dazed. He couldn't find his way. I grabbed a hold of him. It's Philip Mangone, Angone of New York. Philip Mangone. He's burned terribly in the hands, and he's burned terribly in the face. His eyebrows and all his hair is burned off. But he's walking and talking plainly and distinctly, and he told me he jumped. He jumped with other passengers. Now, there's a Mr. Spay. It sounds like Spay. We're not sure of it. And he also got out. Now, it is my sincere hope the majority of the passengers jumped when it came close to the ground, according to what Mr. Mangone told me. He says, thank God he jumped, and we say thank God for him also.
Hello, and welcome to Something This Way Comes. I'm Andrew, and with me, as always, is my silent and apparently lazy co-host, Frank D. Reaper. Tonight, we're taking a look at the Hindenburg Disaster, one of the most famous air disasters in history, which marked the beginning of the end for commercial airship travel, and really, airships in general. Currently, there's only roughly 25 blimps in the world, with only half of them seeing any active use as advertising. Honestly, that's a damn shame. Yes, commercial planes are a whole hell of a lot faster, but damn, imagine taking a cruise on an airship like you would on a cruise ship. You know, Carnival Cruise, Royal Caribbean, whatever. You know, get on one of these things, you see the world from 500 to 600 feet as you soared overhead, versus zooming by quickly and at greater altitude in a plane. The view would be fantastic in one of these. Definitely a case of the journey is better than the destination, whatever the hell that saying is. Plus, being able to get up and move around more than you could on a plane. Granted, not much need a plane when you're at your destination in hours versus days, but no one flies on a plane for the luxurious surroundings of cramped seats and screaming kids. But anyways, the Hindenburg was the largest Zeppelin ever built. And if you don't know, a Zeppelin was a rigid airship, meaning it had a structural framework that maintained its shape even without any air or helium or whatever in it. Where like the Goodyear blimp needed internal pressure to maintain its ship. You know, you pop the Goodyear blimp and it'll just deflate like a balloon. The Hindenburg measured in at just over 800 feet long and 135 feet wide. It was nearly as long as the Titanic and roughly 4 times as long as a Boeing 747. Its rigid frame was made from duralumin, an early type of aluminum and copper alloy that was originally designed to carry helium gas. However, at the time, helium was extremely rare, and the only major supplier of it was a company out of Texas. And because of its scarcity and how hard it was to make helium, the U.S. had put strict regulations on its export, requiring congressional approval. Congress, already thinking there was something sketchy going on in Germany, or perhaps fearing what they were planning to do with the Zeppelins, denied the request, forcing the Germans to use hydrogen instead. Previously, Germany had used Zeppelins as an early type of bomber in World War I with some limited effect. They could fly higher than planes at the time and were damn near silent. So they could appear out of nowhere, drop their deadly payload, and run. What they lacked in destructiveness, they made up for by being a pure terror weapon. However, England quickly found a counter for them, limiting how effective they could be. While their planes couldn't fly as high as them, they found a mix of regular ammo and glowy fire bullets could rip a Zeppelin apart and set the hydrogen inside on fire. The Hindenburg used 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen gas as a lifting agent that filled 16 separate airbags inside the framework. I had an average cruising speed of 76 miles per hour using 4 Daimler-Benz 16-cylinder diesel engines and carried a crew of about 50. 40 people in the flight crew, and the rest were all stewards and cooks. And they had sleeping berths for 72 passengers. The passenger areas of the Hindenburg, which were located inside the frame of the ship, you know, the big thing that looks like the damn balloon. The gondola you see in the picture, that you'll see in pictures and that hangs under the ship, that was the bridge, and that's where they controlled the ship in flight. Now, these passenger areas, they consisted of 2 decks. They had A deck and B deck. A deck included the dining room, which ran the whole length of the port side of A deck, port being the left side of the ship when facing the bow or the front of the ship for all you non-sailory types. A lounge, which in 1936 contained a lightweight baby grand piano made of duralumin and covered in yellow pigskin that everyone makes a big deal about for some damn reason. And a writing room, which I'm guessing would be the old folk equivalent of like a business center or a computer lab. It contained a few tables and some chairs for all your writing requirements. Maybe write a nice postcard for your mama back home. Tell her how much fun you're having in the sky. Just a side note, the Hindenburg was carrying mail and packages, which would end up getting delivered. Also on A deck was 25 double passenger berths, for a total of 50 passengers on A deck, and there was 9 more berths that were eventually added on B deck. Now, these things, they were small, measuring in at about 6.5 by 5.5 feet, with the beds being bunk bed prison style beds, with the upper bunk being able to fold up during the day. I seriously hope you're not claustrophobic. However, they were apparently comparable to railroad sleeping compartments for the time. I mean, I'm not that big, but damn, tall people need not apply on these. The cabins had a call button to summon a steward, a small fold-down desk, a tiny closet, and a teeny tiny sink. No bathrooms on these. You got to run down to B deck to do all your pissing. Maybe while you're down there, you can wait in line for the single shower that had no sort of water pressure, with one passenger comparing it to a stream from a seltzer bottle. Now, all I can see is them waiting in line to see a clown. You get up there and he says, "Hey, smell my flower before you shower." You lean in and he squirts you in the face, because who would have seen that coming? He laughs in your face and goes, "Okay, buddy, there's your shower. Have a nice day." On either side of A deck were promenades, which were seating areas with large viewing windows, which could be opened during flight. Can't do that on a plane. I mean, I guess you could open a window on a plane. Don't really recommend it. It's kind of frowned upon. These windows were pretty big and they slanted outwards, so you had a pretty good view of not only out but down. I seen somewhere they were also made of plexiglass. It was one of the first commercial uses of it, but I cannot find that source anymore, so I could be completely wrong on that. Don't take my word for it. Down on B deck, it contained the kitchens, bathrooms, and shower, the crew and officer mess hall, and a cabin for the chief steward, which contained the only door that connected the passenger and crew areas. And of course, there was my favorite room on the ship, and by far the most popular room, considering the times the ship was built in, the smoking room. Yes, they put a smoking room in a ship using a highly flammable gas to keep themselves aloft. Despite this, the smoking room was relatively safe. They kept the room temperature above average to prevent any leaking hydrogen from entering the room. And the door was a specially constructed double airlock, which was closely monitored by staff to prevent anyone from walking out with a lit cigarette or pipe or any kind of open flame, really. A single electric lighter was provided. All matches and lighters would have been taken before boarding, and open flames were strictly prohibited on the flight. Being on B deck, it was at the bottom of the ship, so the likelihood of there being any sort of incident from smoking would be extraordinarily slim, since hydrogen, being lighter than air, it is unlikely it would have settled at the bottom of the craft. The real danger from smoking would have been an accidental fire in the passenger section. Even a small one could have led to the ship's complete destruction. The landing one of these damn things involved the use of a mooring mast and a ground crew that could contain up to and over 300 men. Every country had a different procedure and way of landing, so that number varied depending on where you were. Now, I'm taking this from an account of landing the airship Graf Zeppelin, the precursor and sister ship to the Hindenburg. When they come in for a landing, contact would be made with the ground crew via radio or flag signal to determine ground temperature and wind conditions. Under normal conditions, the ship would be descending with its nose slightly down, with a fire on the ground throwing out smoke to show wind direction. The ship would be coming down fairly slowly at a rate of about 100 feet per minute. When the ship was over the landing flag, it would lower its lines out. The engines would be thrown into reverse to slow and stop the ship. The yaw lines would be dropped from the nose and dragged to the left and right of the ship by 30 men apiece, while 20 men on each side of the ship would grab more ropes that were dropped and literally pull the ship down from the sky. 70 more men would rush up and take control of the ship and guide it to the mast where the nose of the ship would be connected. The rear end of the ship would then be attached to a weighted sled that allowed the airship to swing around the mast with the wind. The mooring mast was often on rails and would be used to pull the airship into the hangar or wherever it needed to be. Now, the Hindenburg was the height of luxury, costing roughly $450 per ticket. It's roughly $8,000 today. At the time, it'd be about the same as an ocean liner cruise, but the cruise would have taken twice as long to cross the Atlantic. When it left Frankfurt on May 3rd, it was its 11th trip to the United States and its 63rd flight since it first launched in 1936. When it took off, it flew over the Netherlands before following the English Channel and crossing over to England, where it would make its way to the Atlantic. From there, it would fly over the southern tip of Greenland and cross over North American soil near Newfoundland. Headwinds over the Atlantic had delayed the flight by nearly 12 hours. Its 6 a.m. arrival being pushed back to 6 p.m. At noon on May 6th, it had reached Boston, and by 3 p.m., passengers could take in view the skyscrapers of Manhattan. Upon arrival at the Naval Air Station in Lakehurst, New Jersey at 4:15, both the Hindenburg captain and the commander of the naval station became concerned with the poor weather conditions and recommended delaying landing until conditions improved. They departed for the beaches and shores of New Jersey to wait out the storm. At roughly 6 p.m., conditions had improved and were deemed favorable, and the earliest possible landing was recommended. Approaching the landing field from the southwest at a height of 600 feet, they circled the field to observe conditions on the ground before conducting a wide left turn to fly a descending oval pattern around the north and west end of the field to line up for landing heading into the wind, which was coming from the east. They released some hydrogen to reduce buoyancy. As the ship continued its turn, its tail began to dip down. More hydrogen was released to try to level the ship out. When this failed, water they used for ballast was dumped to level the ship, and even more hydrogen was released from the bow. When this failed, several crewmen were ordered to the bow to add more weight to the front. While they fought to keep the ship level, the wind shifted to the southwest, prompting the captain to have to shift direction for landing. Since the maneuvering room was tight and they were anxious to get on land, a tight S-turn was ordered. Now, there's speculation that during this turn, something snapped in the airframe, which would eventually lead to the hydrogen leaking out. That is pure speculation. A quick turn to port to swing out, and then a tight turn to starboard to bring the ship online with the field. After reaching the mooring mast at a height of 180 feet, the forward landing ropes were lowered at 7:21. At this point, two members of the portside landing party would go on to testify that they observed a wave-like flutter on the outer covering of the ship as if gas was escaping from one of the 16 cells in the large airframe. At 7:25, the first visible flames were spotted. Witnesses would later testify that they appeared in one of two places, either at the top of the hull of the ship, just ahead of the vertical fin, or between the rear port engine and port tail fin near where the flutter was first spotted. The Lakehurst commander would later describe a mushroom-shaped burst of flame erupting in front of the upper tail fin, while the assistant mooring officer, who was atop the mooring mast, would testify an area behind the rear port engine seemed to collapse, followed by streaks of flame and a muffled explosion. Then the entire tail of the ship was engulfed in flame. The ship remained level for a few seconds before the tail started to dip down. This would point the nose to the sky when a giant burst of flame shot out of the bow where 12 crew members had been stationed. Below on the promenades, several passengers and crews had gathered to watch the landing. The sudden tilting of the ship caused them to be hurled 15 to 20 feet and slam into each other as they hit the rear wall of the ship. The fire spread rapidly through the ship, burning through the entire length in less than a minute. Survival came down to a matter of where you were when the fire broke out. Just plain sheer dumb luck at being in the right place. Passengers and crew began jumping out of the promenade windows to escape the rapidly burning ship. Most of the passengers and crews near the windows on the promenade would survive. Those closer to the center would never make it out. As the ship settled to the ground, less than 30 seconds after the fire started, those who had jumped ran for safety along with members of the ground crew who had been in position below the ship ready to assist the landing. However, Chief Petty Officer Frederick Tobin would shout and rally the sailors in the landing party and lead them running back to the burning ship to try and rescue any survivors. Of the 97 people who boarded the Hindenburg in Frankfurt, Germany, 62 would survive the crash. 13 passengers and 22 crew members would die during the crash, along with one civilian member of the landing party. Alright, so what happened? Well, be quite frank, no one knows for sure. It's one of history's mysteries. Ooh. There's many theories about what caused the fire. From the likely and plausible conclusion that both American and German investigators reached at the time of the accident, and is still supported today after 80 years of research and scientific testing, that an electrostatic discharge, or a spark for normal people, ignited leaking hydrogen. The spark having been caused by the electrically charged atmosphere and the ship having been grounded through the landing lines, potentially caused a spark between the ship's outer covering and its metal framework. Or less likely through a coronal discharge, also known as St. Elmo's fire. If you know what that is, you're doing better than me. I do know they are not talking about the movie that came out in the 80s. Now, the real mystery here is what caused the leak. That question has never been answered. The only thing that is known is that there was a significant leak before the disaster happened. And of course, there are the extremely unlikely theories that have zero actual evidence. These range from a variation of the covering they used over the airframe being extremely flammable, either due to being coated in rocket fuel or thermite, or was just extremely flammable. You know, they couldn't come up with anything else. So they just said, oh, it was just flammable. That caused the whole thing. Yeah. No, it was not. The only evidence they had for this is some common ingredients in rocket fuel and thermite was used on the covering. However, none of these were used in any significant amount or the right mix to even be considered dangerous. And as far as the cover being highly flammable, large sections of the covering would survive the disaster, and it was estimated it would take roughly 40 hours for the entire cover to burn. There's the sabotage theories, claiming either a passenger or crew member placed a bomb or there's that damn word again, a flammable device in the ship. There was two main suspects for these theories. The first suspect was Joseph Spa, an American acrobat who performed under the ultimate best stage name ever, Bendova. He drew suspicions from frequent trips to the cargo area that was normally off limits to passengers. However, he had just purchased a new German Shepherd puppy in Germany, and he was taking frequent visits to go see his puppy. You know, make sure he's being fed, stuff like that. Oh, and he kept making jokes about the Nazis on an airship full of Nazis. So he was pretty fucking ballsy, and I bet he was one hell of a performer. The theory is he used his acrobatic skills to climb into the framework on one of his trips to see his dog and planted a bomb which exploded and caused the accidents. Again, no actual evidence, just pure speculation. Although Joseph did use his acrobatic training to save his life that night. He rode the fiery airship till it was almost 20 feet from the ground before leaping and rolling out of the way. He managed to twist his ankle in the fall and crawled away to safety when the airship hit the ground. The other suspect was Eric Spell? I don't know. I have no idea how to pronounce it. He was a rigger that worked on the Hindenburg. His fiance, His fiancée at the time was a communist and strongly opposed the Nazi regime, convinced him to plant a bomb on board the ship. An explosion or flash of light before the fire was reported in the area Eric was assigned to. And that is the only evidence they have for him. Sadly, Eric was one of the men who lost his life during the disaster and was never able to refute these claims or face his accusers. Again, all circumstantial evidence against him. His fiancée, years later, called the idea he would do this absolute madness. There was never any physical evidence of an explosive device or ignition source found after countless hours of investigations by both American and German investigators. And that was the Hindenburg disaster. And I just want to make a quick note here. There's a company out of Sweden called Ocean Sky Cruises that is offering a cruise, or an expedition as they call it, on an airship. They're currently doing a North Pole expedition, which is completely booked up until 2026. And according to their website, they're going to do an African expedition soon. Now, space is severely limited with only 8 cabins available for a total of 16 passengers. And the cost of one of these cabins? Just a measly $200,000 American. So nope, not going to be getting that Sky Cruise anytime soon. If ever. Alright, thank you for listening. And if you like the show, please leave a rating or review. Any questions or comments can be sent directly to the show at podsomething@gmail.com. And come back next week for more. Thank you and goodbye.